Oh, it's me. Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm back. I'm Josephine Baird. A lot of you will know me, I think. I'm a lecturer here at the University of Uppsala Game Design Department. This is also for the people at home because we're videoing these. To the left of me is Vilhelm, who is the, I'm going to get this right, head of Film Gotland.
Really?
Damn it. What are you?
Nice to meet you. And I actually come from Film Gotland. I work at Film Gotland, but I am a film commissioner working with talent development and production. So nice to meet you guys.
You're a film commissioner, and that always makes head to me, but that's right, okay. Yes. We have Kirsty Gillmore and Samantha Baird here. Samantha Baird, who, for some of you, met earlier, because we just had a lovely talk about It Takes a Village, is an actor, amongst many other things, who's appeared in games like The Excavation of Hobbs Barrow and, most recently, Baldur's Gate 3. And for my own personal geeky fabulousness, also has been in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and The Sandman audio dramas, which I think is absolutely fabulous. And Kirsty Gillmore, who, amongst many other things, is a director and casting director who's worked on many, many projects, too innumerable to name, some of which I know I'm not allowed to name because you haven't told me, but also has recently worked on Baldur's Gate 3 as well, with Sam. So, yes. And the panel really is an opportunity for us to talk about character co-creation, which for many of you, you may have heard of like character creation, and we teach that in that sort of singular sense, that word. But Vilja and I, we've been having conversations. For those of you who may have attended a talk last year, we gave a talk with Sonny Jorgensen about the game It Takes Two. And we've carried this conversation between film, traditional sort of film production in a narrative sense, and game production. And we wanted to continue doing these sort of talks. And this is the next one in that sort of series. And the idea is to consider the similarities, but also some of the differences in the ways in which the mediums work. And one of those differences was inspired by something that Sam and Kirsty have said to me on different occasions, is that when looking at character creations in a sort of traditional film narrative way, one considers perhaps maybe 1, 2, 3 people are involved with a character's creation. Director, writer, actor, maybe casting director, but we're looking at a handful. If you're looking at the number of people who may be involved in the creation of a character for a video game, especially for a larger one, and we really wanted to talk about that. We wanted to shine a light on the numbers of people involved and how that works, because it's a particularly interesting and complicated dynamic. So that's sort of the focus of the conversation today. So, shall I ask away, or do you want to ask questions first, or say anything else?
No, I can add.
Oh, there you go.
Like Josephine said, the talks that we've did last year about the meeting between game and film, sort of this traditional medium meeting sort of a more modern medium, at least a non-linear medium, and the obvious fact that we are working with storytelling, both, and even though having difficulties meeting, really, which is quite interesting. But what's interesting and what we think is that when we talk about these things, we look at storytelling from different perspectives, from where we come from, and that's also sort of the basis of what we're going to talk about today, I think. So you can fire away with the questions now, Josephine.
Okay. So the first question, I guess, is because you've both worked in linear narratives, but also in games. Can you elaborate on what you think might be the difference between developing or performing a character in games versus other forms of media, film, theatre, etc.? Is there a significant difference? I hope so, because that's.
I guess there's also, you're talking about linear and non-linear, but there's also interactive and I guess more passive as well. And I would add testers to the mix of people that create the character, because you get that. At least on Baldur's Gate, we had feedback, and then that might actually change scenes. We might have to go and redo them or have extra lines to bring that into it. So there's this sort of loop. It's not even that is not linear, not just the storytelling. Although personally, my relationship is with the writer first. There is nothing without the actual script. And then there'll be, on the day, the collaboration with the director is quite simple for me on the day. But yeah, aware that there are many, many departments that are involved in creating characters, particularly on these larger games.
Right. Sorry, a lot to think about. Okay, so I guess in terms of thinking about timelines and development life cycles, which you'll will be thinking about development life cycles and live in development life cycles. One of the big, interesting what you were saying, what you just said about loop. In terms of character creation, when it comes to a linear medium like film or TV or even theatre, once you have the script, and once a script is set, and yes, there may be changes during the production process, the filming process, but essentially, unless you're prepared to pay for complete rewrites, complete reshoots, a character doesn't essentially change a lot. A character is very set from the time you start. It's written on the page, the writer writes it, you do casting, then you have the filming process, or the production process, if you like, where the creation of that character comes through with the director and the actor. And that, you see development of characters over series, seasons of things. So if you've got a TV series, but with games, the loop you were talking about, we have our development life cycle, don't we? We have the pipeline, and it goes back and it goes round again. So you start, you have writing, you have character iteration, you have. You then might go off and record dialogue or record motion capture, and then you have your testing phase, and that all goes. It's put into game, and you put it in game, and you see how the character works, and then you might go back through the life cycle again. You go back through the whole process again, and those characters will change through that process. Oh, we thought it looked great green, but when we tested it, the green really blended into to these particular backgrounds, so we're going to have to change that. So they're no longer green, and it could be as aesthetic as that, or it could be, people really didn't like the voice of that character. We're going to have to completely change that. Or, we've actually decided that this particular aspect of the character people responded really, really well to. This particular aspect, they didn't. So we're going to reshape the story. We're going to change things. We're going to give them different quests. We're going to give them a whole side backstory to do something to highlight this, because it's really important to our audience. We've discovered our target audience is 12 to 13-year-olds who really love dogs. So we're going to now give them a dog. And we've got a whole side quest for dogs. Which is, I'm making this up, but this happens all the time. So I guess it's that kind of, it's a different life cycle process, which really has a very big impact between linear and interactive. The life cycles are quite different, and that has a big impact on character, I think, for me. Just the fact, and you have to be aware of that as someone who works in interactive spaces. You have to be aware that characters could change at any time, and you think you've created this beautiful character, and then you come back 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years later, and they're like, so... It's not a tiefling anymore. It's now a vampire. So it's an elf vampire. So we can, and that's going to be, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, we're going to throw all of that out and start again. But we still have to keep the core of the character. It's still the same character, but it's completely different at the same time. Yeah.
There are so many follow-up questions to this, but maybe.
Sorry, that was really.
But maybe could we step back a bit, and maybe you could tell us about what you've been doing, what your processes have looked like in Baldur's Gate, for instance. Your work, what does this look like? What have you been doing?
Sure. Okay. So I am
just to give us an example.
Yeah, just an example.
What the process looks like.
I'm a voice and performance director. I was a voice and performance director for Baldur's Gate 3, and I also did additional casting, and I also do dialogue production. So I handle mocap pipelines and dialogue pipelines, VO pipelines for games. So where I enter the process in terms of character creation is that I will liaise with writers and narrative designers sometimes quite early on in the process, and sometimes later on in the process. And we talk about the script at that point. I deal with dialogue scripts and VO scripts. And by that point, the character may or may not have a lot going on. Depends on where you are in the process. Depends on where the game has involved their writers in the process. You know, I will also at that point, if it's a mocapped character, if we'll be doing mocap or performance capture, PCAP shoots, then I'll be talking to animators as well, and we'll be talking about character artwork, and we'll be talking about storyboards, and we'll be talking about cinematics. Yeah, and that's all pre-production stuff. And then when we get to the recording phase, then I will be dealing with beautiful actors. And at that point, I will still be dealing with writers and narrative designers and animators and mocap engineers and all those people. Yeah, and that's where I kind of plug into that part of the process. What's different between my job and, say, a film director job is that I am not the game's director. So the whole creative process of the ownership of the game is the game director. And often the game director, the creative director of the game, does not deal with the actors. Sometimes they do. Neil Druckmann's a really, really famous example of that, but often they don't. So so the creative director of Baldur's Gate 3 did not direct any of the actors, didn't get involved in that. Yeah. So that's quite common in games. Yeah. The big ones that you hear about when they're all really, really hands-on, that's more of a that's less common. Yeah, So it's interesting because that's why I'm very specific about in the game space about saying I'm a voice and performance director, because I specifically direct the performances of actors. I am not responsible for the creative direction of the game. And that's really different from film, TV, or theatre, where the director of the show, the director of the film, is responsible for the whole content of it. But I have nothing to do with the way the game looks, in terms of, like, that's not my responsibility. I don't interface with that at all. Aside from, I do interface with I do talk to the animators, but I don't make decisions about the way the character looks. For me, it's just totally the performance. I'm going to hand it over to Sam, so you can talk about.
I'll give a much shorter answer. Not at all. It's a brilliant answer. I'm very fascinated by that. Yeah. I want to clarify that by performance, we're talking physical movement here, because the word performance covers everything. It's a shame that's the word they've picked. So you were looking at movement and voice, and we recorded both at the same time, which I now understand is unusual, because I keep getting asked if I did it myself or if I did it at a separate date. No, all on the same day. That makes sense. So that's how we did it. But from my perspective, when I got the role, I received a massive Excel spreadsheet in alphabetical order of the names of the scenes, and a character arc, and an arc. So I know where the character's going, in what order. It's like reading a Choose Your Own Adventure book, but from cover to cover. I could kind of piece it together. But for me, the relationship with yourself was mainly you being my eyes and ears in the world, in a way. In more visual media, film, TV, theatre, you don't have to do, because it's there, or it's in the text. In terms of exploring text in the way that I normally would have done, couldn't do it, had to do it by instinct. There was just too much, and you don't want to get, well, we know that you don't want to get too fixed on a way of delivering, because, well, there's so many dialogue trees. So again, have to be talked through that quite a bit, because it's very specific. In the room, I'd go in, get suited up, calibration. There's so you've got your performance director. In my head, they're a movement director, a voice director. Sometimes it was the same person, and then a mocap engineer and an audio engineer. So team of 4 most of the time, and then a direct line to writers when I was there. And that was the setup for me. And then I'd also have, like, we called it the Power Ranger, didn't we? Which is like a neutral human representation of what you're doing. So I didn't see how Karlak looked in space. I didn't have a clue. I just had to make sure it was honest to what had been described to me and what looked good on the screen. So you can see why I'm talking, I'm doing this. Karlak can't do that, looks weird. So I'm theatre trained, we use Laban technique. For me specifically, that's what I wanted to do. That's it's efforts in space. Was it sustained or unsustained?
Laban was developed for choreography, dancers. So yeah, it's
quality of movement.
Yeah, it's specific and non-specific, and sustained and non-sustained. And you can look up Laban, heavy and light. So Laban, Laban, if anybody wanted to look it up. If you ever direct actors in space, actors moving in space, it's very in space. Yeah, it's very useful.
Use it in Spain.
Yeah, they definitely. But we use it a lot. So, for example, press if
Was
you can
mine
say, pressing, like
It's very
literally.
heavy. So it's
Yeah.
going to stop me doing this. It looks
Yeah.
weird on a bigger model.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can, one of them is dab, which is, that kind of, so if you want that kind of a flick, if you want that kind of a, glide, you can look them up. They're very useful. I use them for voice directing as well as movement. Yes.
And a great way for the actor to stop intellectualizing that. There's no thought behind it. You can use animal studies, colours, all sorts of things that get you into it. But when you're playing someone so physically different from yourself, just having that one word was so great in the room. So I've gone into it a little bit more, but yeah, a team of 4, me, huge script that I've kind of read through. You'd get a heads up on the day we were going to do this scene, but sometimes it was on the fly. They've just added some new lines. That's kept it spicy, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it's Baldur's Gate 3 is an enormous game. And in case anybody hasn't, no spoilers, it's enormous. Go put it. I think somebody from the team tweeted relatively recently that on average people put in 100 hours into the game. That's a Steam like metric, which is insane. That's an insane amount of time. But yeah, there was on release. There were over 1 million words in that game on release, and I have the graphics something. Yeah, it was, and the cinematics put together were longer than the whole Game of Thrones series. Yeah. So we're talking about an immense. We can't give actors all the scripts because to start with, it hasn't been written yet. It wasn't written at any time, and we can't give them, hi, here's a 600-page spreadsheet, and we might be recording any part of this, any part, pick a part. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is so fascinating. In a completely different life, I would have been going to Laban Centre in near Goldsmiths with you. So I love hearing about that because that's my goodness, flash from all those wonderful techniques. I'm gonna have to look those up again. Given all of
ringing,
that,
I just want to bring ringing into it.
Oh,
that's my favourite.
No, I remember.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Tortured.
My audition piece was being rain.
Oh.
Just remembering, and it's
being rain.
Being rain.
Being
oh yeah.
rain.
Oh yeah.
Love
Sorry.
Love that.
Just
be a tree. Yeah.
It was no. It was. She was very serious and was like, no, not trees, rain.
Oh.
Rain. And I was like, gotcha. Sorry, flashbacks. I know. But thank you so much for explaining so much of that. You've with all that immense information and the number of people that you've intimated would be involved with such a process, how do you keep it consistent? How do you manage to maintain a sense of, consistent character through all of that?
I'm going to bring up a really important thing which I don't think people mention enough when they talk about game design, and that is documentation. Documentation, yes. Look at the people going there. I cannot tell. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 is the biggest game I've ever worked on, and I've worked on everything from micro indies, very very small games, up until Baldur's Gate 3. I've worked on the Call of Duty series, so that's but Baldur's Gate 3 is the largest in terms of content and that kind of thing. And I can't tell you how important it is to document your character. You've all hopefully got story Bibles, you've got design Bibles, you document your character and keep that in a way that all of your team members can contribute, because character design in games is not the sole it's not owned by one person. It's an input from a lot of different departments. If you decide, I gave this example just sitting outside, but I think it's quite a good one. If you're the art person, you're the artist in charge of drawing the character, and you go, what would be cool? Swords are cool. They're going to have a sword. Swords, yeah, 2 swords. Yeah, amazing. Then if you give that to then a writer, they're going to go, okay, why do they have swords? Because they can't just have them to look cool. Well, they could. Is that their character thing? Do they just have them because they look cool? Does that mean, what does that say about their character? Is that because they're really insecure, or they came from or they've grown up with a lot of toxic masculinity and they feel that they have to have 2 swords in order to look more masculine? Do you see where I'm going with this? So you and that makes the artist go, oh, good point. Oh, cool. So we're going to make one of them really old, and the that's an old sword. That looks cool. One's a new sword, and the writer's like, oh, cool. Okay. So I think they've got a lot of issues with their father, and they inherited this sword from their father. So by the time, so you've gone through this back and forth beautifully on Slack, on Discord, whatever you're doing, and you've both gone, you know, these two people have gone, great, okay, this is what we've decided. Now, if none of that is documented, if all you've got is this cool character with two swords, along comes whoever's going to, like, the narrative designer, the sound design, the audio, whoever's going to record this, you know, they take it to the actor, and the actor goes, so why have they got two swords? Yeah, are they supposed to be a warrior? And if none of that is written down, all of that beautiful character stuff is gone. And then you may have already recorded some lines. You may have already recorded, 100 lines, 200 lines. And then the actors, and then maybe you've recast, maybe you've changed the actor, maybe you've changed the character. If you don't have any of that written down, then at some point you're going to put it into the game, and there might be a line which references the swords, and it's quite clear the actor has no clue why they've got swords, and it's quite clear that there's no, why have you referenced an old sword when it doesn't look like an old sword anymore? because the character's been, the person who originally created it has left the company, and now blah blah blah. You see where I'm going with this. So this is all. One of the ways you keep consistency is to write everything down, because I think of it this way. This is a bit harsh, but if you were hit by a bus tomorrow, what happens to the information you hold? Write it down. Write it down so you put it in somewhere easily shareable. So that's one way we did it on Baldur's Gate 3. When we set the characters, excuse me, we wrote it down. I don't know if anybody's played the game. I don't know if anybody's played the game. This is stupid. Has anybody heard of it? Yeah, little game, small impact, dating sim, the dating sim Baldur's Gate 3. But the character of the narrator, played beautifully by Amelia Tyler, who I directed a lot over almost a 4-year period. There are 17 different styles of narration in the game. They're all very subtle, but they're all there. And at one point, I went, I'm writing them all down. So because we kept referencing them in the sessions, and it just got a bit confusing because a new director would come on and go, so what is this? So we wrote them all down. So they are, and we did that for all the characters. We wrote everything down. And that is one of the key ways you keep consistency. You always have to think, from my perspective, yeah, if you were hit by a bus tomorrow, could someone else pick that up and keep it going so that if you were playing the game, you cannot tell how many people worked on it and where the shifts were. And if that is not if you're like, everything resides in this one auteur and they are the owner of all the information, that's not going to work, I don't believe in auteurs, just in case. Yeah.
Oh, I haven't got much to add to that, have I? See, for me, for this particular, I do document like a bastard. On Hobbs Barrow, I was given an entire script. We recorded in order. And in 6 sessions or something, that was done as voice only, and I did it from home. Very different from this. This kind of lived in my body. It's a weird one to say, but with Karlak, it had to, because I had an intense period of recording which worked for me because no one ever had to play me back my own recording. I just done it the other night, so I remembered. But for her, it was this huge ball of PTSD with no name, and then the jokes. And what you would get occasionally, you'd get a director that would go, oh, she's fun, she just is a laugh, isn't she? I was like, she's fucking traumatized. So I had to be then the guardian of that character. It wasn't very often, but sometimes people don't have time to read the documentation, or they've come in last minute to replace someone else or whatever. So I had to really be protective over her sometimes and just make sure, because I'm the one on the line, right? If she's the most boring character in video games ever, according to Games Radar or something, I'm the one that gets the brunt of that, right? Yeah, so I'm very aware of that too. So I was extremely protective over her for that reason.
That's actually a really interesting thing about, like you said, she lives in your body. Yeah. So something that I think a lot of actors do is that they have catchphrases. Neil Newbern, who plays Astarion, who I directed a lot, had a "Hello, I'm Astarion," and that was his little catchphrase to get into the character, which he did at the top of every single session or every single time we went in to get him back into the character. So that is something. And in terms of, I know. but yeah.
Oh, you bastard, sorry.
Yeah.
We haven't got long.
Yeah.
Which is kind of her.
Yeah, exactly. But I think all of you did it. Like all of the origin characters had something that got them back into it. And I think as developers, something that might help in terms of that you can pass on in terms of character consistency is artwork, any artwork that you've used, but any references. References are really, really useful for anybody doing character creation. If you're all singing off the same hymn sheet, if you're all using the same references, I think that's really useful, and that will help with tonal consistency as well. So that it's very easy for people if they see abstracts of characters, whether it's just a rough description or a rough sketch or whatever, to go, okay, I think this, and that then becomes it. And then somebody's going, oh no, I saw that in a completely different way. And that will lead you to inconsistencies and fights. It will lead you to fights. I mean, discussions, robust discussions. But I think that's something that I know quite a lot of people use are songs and music playlists. So if you've gone, okay, my music playlist for this character is rock, that's great, or metal, or hip hop, or trance. Please not trance. I don't want a character who's trance. Mike and it's oh no, that was that's to be fair, mushroom people. But it's a but that can be really cool as well, to kind of go, hey, here's a playlist that we feel this character would use. We listen to this with the artwork, we listen, the writers, and that's cool. And a lot of devs that I've worked with have that, especially if they're small teams, have that collectively. They go, cool, do you think this, this particular song reminds them of their mum? This particular song, brings out their playful side, that kind of thing. That can be quite useful as well. So establishing tonal consistencies, I think, from the start is really useful, so you're not working in isolation and you'll come together and go, what is this character? It's a complete mess because everybody had their own take and you're not working together on it.
Do you want to have a space for Q&A, or should we just carry on the conversation? I've got one more question that I think I can ask, and I know there's so many things that we wanted to talk about. Is there anything that's changing in the ways in which characters are being created and developed at the moment? And what kind of
I don't know.
Opportunities are...
There's too many NDAs, and it tell me anything.
Okay. All right, maybe I can go. We can do something else.
No, I mean, sorry, I'm not being secret. I mean, as a performer, they don't tell you anything, so I don't have insight. So I'm going to leave that to you.
Yeah, I guess maybe in the process of it, is there anything that's radically changed? Maybe even recently or in the recent past, has there been big shifts in this, or has it been the same since you started?
Oh, it's definitely not been the same since I started. Okay, so some of the big shifts are similar to things happening in film and TV. So one of the big things that we think about more is representation and authenticity. That's become a really big thing, and that's incredible and brilliant and really, really great. So now there's a bigger shift to, that's been a much, rather than like, it's cool if this character is Native American, wouldn't that be cool? Now, and that's where it ends, yeah. Now we're actually we're going to talk to people with lived experiences of this. We're going to talk to people who are from this area, who are from this culture, who can represent this, and that we see that now rippling across. So it's not just ethnicity and culture, but we're also talking about it in terms of gender as well, and that's really important. Safety. Yeah.
Because you were talking about intimacy coordinators.
I was, yeah. So safety, in terms of, there's a lot more emphasis on emotional and mental health safety. In the performance space, we've started using intimacy coordinators. Does anybody not know what an intimacy coordinator does? Yeah, okay, so intimacy coordinators are responsible for the safe management and sometimes direction of scenes with intimate content. So we're talking romance scenes, sex scenes, essentially, but it's got quite a broad kind of content. Any kind of scene which would have an intimate or sexual content in it, and that ranges from everything from like nice romantic scenes to scenes that can be very traumatic. Yeah, so intimacy coordinators will help work with directors, they will work with actors, performers, they will work with writers to talk about how you can capture these scenes truthfully and safely so that everybody feels comfortable, taking it right from the start of the process right to the end, so that everybody, transparency is key, safety is key, and everybody feels emotionally and mentally safe so that they can, freedom to create right from the start. It's about not traumatizing anyone, because I personally think that not traumatizing anyone is a good idea. And we've moved that into the game space as well. Baldur's Gate 3 was one of the first games to start working with intimacy coordinators for mocap and performance capture, because and I have a lot of people talking about this, but you're in suits, you're in mocap suits, but you are still asking people to put themselves, especially for anybody who hasn't played Baldur's Gate 3. Spoilers, there's a lot of romance, and you're asking people to put themselves in, even fully clothed, you're asking themselves to be intimate with some people they haven't met before, with 4 people or more in the room, playing a character. And in order to be truthful and honest as performers, you need to be quite emotionally raw and open. And asking people to do that without knowing what their background is, without knowing what's going to trigger them, is unsafe. So intimacy coordination is about making people safe.
I'll just quickly add to that, in film and TV, you'll know.
Yeah.
You will know beforehand. In games, you don't know that you're going to be doing that sort of thing. You might not know what day you're doing it on, so it was great to have the safeguards there that we could bring that in. We've also got the issue with witchcraft. There's people out there who don't want to cast spells because of religious reasons or whatever. And again, if you don't warn them, if you don't have that consent. So it was great that a game that's so famous now for consent got the consent of their actors, so I'm very pleased that I got to work on that. And that's just the luck of the draw.
I mean, that's completely true. And so I think I've seen that, but also I've seen those conversations happening, and they should be earlier on in the process. We're going to make a game which is going to tackle these themes. How do we feel about that? All of us. I'm working on a game at the moment called The Quiet Things, one of the few games that I actually can talk about because it's got an open development process. Quiet Things deals with very, very heavy themes of mental health and depression. It also has scenes of suicide attempts. It has scenes of sexual abuse in it. Nothing is graphic. It is a walking sim, and it's not graphically animated. We take it up to the point of an act happening, but we don't go any further. It's mainly done through dialogue and memory flashbacks and audio, but it is very, very heavy. And I am asking actors to put themselves in those situations. So we use a well-being coordinator, who is somebody who is a mental health professional and can do mental health first aid. And they are there in our recording sessions to support not just the cast, but also the crew. And we do regular check-ins, and that's happening a lot more. I see that a lot in the dev teams I work with, regular mental health check-ins, regular emotional health check-ins. How are you doing? Is there anything that we're making on this beautiful world that we're creating? I don't know how much that happens in the film and TV space. I don't know.
Is there?
Yeah.
It's a trend, as you say. It's getting there, but there are still some really bad examples. We did talk about this before. This is regardless of which one you choose, it's a passion-driven industry, using creative people. I'm saying using now, but sometimes creative, passionate people are used for, as workforce in it, and stuff happens. But so that's why we thought it was interesting to talk about this sort of sustainability. Do you see trends in it? And intimacy coordinators is one of them. Do you see you mentioned trends in terms of keeping people safe and talking about the mental health and so on. Do you see more trends in that sense?
Yeah, I see it where people are interested in game players' mental health as well. And there's Safe in Our World. There's various mental health charities for games. So I see that, and I think that's a really great thing to think of. I think one of the things about games that is, you can watch film and TV over and over again. But
I was going to mention the immersive element, and I think maybe that's why it can be it is more affecting. That's the point. But yes, if you're going to go there, and I saw it in training. As performers telling these stories, we're sometimes telling the most extreme things that can happen to humans. And these are humans, all right, they might be 18, 20 years old, but stuff's happened to them. And I'd see people have breakdowns, you know, and then the teacher sort of go, yeah, there's a counsellor, sorry, you know, that's sort of it. And they just, that was normal.
Sorry, we
and it
traumatized
seems to be like, it seems, I want to say Me Too, but really Weinstein specifically, that this, it started with film first and then it's quickly come into games as well. And I only see that getting better and better over time because it's needed and it works.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's a generational thing as well. You know, we're now seeing, you know, people like me who started playing games a few years ago. Back when my first game was a DOS game that I ever played, so good. Super, super pleased. Yeah, everybody's like, DOS? What's that?
Divinity Original Sin?
Yeah, yes, that, yeah, no. Bit further than that. We had a floppy, we saved them on floppy disks. Oh, I know, so there we go.
Change the drive.
Yeah, change the drive. So, you know, this, but this is, you know, we're now, I teach acting performance for games at university and now at a drama school in the UK, and now my students have grown up with games, you know? And so that's a huge shift because these are the things I think it will only get. I think these trends will, you know, inclusivity, diversity, representation, safety. I think these will only continue to grow because the generation of game players now have grown up with them, and at least game players, but also game developers. And yeah, I know gaming can be incredibly toxic, but then you know you have toxic fandom for everything. But what I'm seeing is that, you know, brilliant people like yourselves who are out here studying it, take this on board and go, yes, I want that to happen. I want to make it a part of my development process, a part of my process as a developer, not just a nice add-on to have, but I'm going to bake it in from the start. We start here. And I'm seeing that more. I'm seeing more indie companies start with like, right, the very first thing, we want to make this cool game, but here's how we're going to make it. Here are how we are going to work as a company, and I think that's really important. And you see that more rather than like, hey, we're going to make this game. Oh no, we've had problems. Oh, we're just going to ignore those, or maybe fire that person, and then you know. But now I'm seeing people go, we want to make a game that works for everybody as a team, and you see that from the start. Yeah.
I think those qualities really shine through, and there's a reason why Baldur's Gate 3, an asymmetric CRPG that takes 100 hours to complete. It's not, one would say, the mainstream genre of game you'd expect to be so popular, but it's because of the compelling characters, the narrative that just draws people in. And I think it comes from an incredibly complex process done with intention and care. And it's so wonderful to hear you talk about this, and I know there's so much more we could hear. I want to give a little bit of time, if it's okay, just to open it up, because it's going to be a little bit of time, so we might have to be quite selective about how many people we can ask. But if you have a question, can I get a question? I'm gonna. There were people who asked questions last time, so I'm gonna direct them to the people who haven't. So I'm gonna ask. Have you first? Is that right?
I was wondering, you were talking a lot about directing like characters that were pre-written, of course, like Carlac or Starion, your companions. But how do you direct a character that, like Tav, the one that can be potentially anyone?
Okay, so the question was, how do we direct a character like a Tav? For those who have not played Baldur's Gate 3, Tav is the name that they gave to the player characters, a generic player character that you can create yourself. There are 8 different voices that you can choose from, and we had 8 different actors playing those characters, and they were fully mocapped as well. And this is something that's quite interesting, that's different from film and TV. But it's kind of like, sort of like what we might call an audience cipher, like the audience surrogate, maybe, that we might, but it's a different thing, unless you're doing like completely first-person camera, where I guess they don't talk, or sometimes they do, but yeah, it is, how do we direct someone who has to be everything, is essentially what you're, So, player characters are really difficult in a lot of ways. What we did for Baldur's Gate 3 is what we discovered really early on, is that we didn't have a lot of character bio for them. Like, we literally had, it's a D&D game, for those of you who don't know, so we literally had rogue. Rogue. Yeah, yes, it was a class. We discovered really, really quickly, and we kind of knew this already, but, you know, you can't just go play a rogue. Cool. Go. So what we did is we wrote little backstories for them. So we worked with the actor. Nothing specific, because we're not the writers, but we worked with the actors to write generic backstories for those characters, so we had something for the actor. So basically it was things like one of our scholar characters. He was, you know, studious, very learned, but he had been trained in combat from a young age, so he knew how to handle himself. He just chose not to most of the time. His preferred way of handling things was to handle things, you know, deal with it with words first, but if he needed to, he could handle himself in battle. He was more reserved. He preferred to be more methodical. He took his time deciding things. So he was very observant. His worldview was observant and studious. And once you have that kind of lens, you can frame anything through that. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah, so that I would say, think about, you don't have to, a player character, I wouldn't give them a specific personality unless they need to, like I think something like Cyberpunk, those two player characters had quite specific personalities because they decided on that. But something, if you want to make it generic, that is fine. And your lines like, you know, especially something like an RPG, which is like, that door's locked, have to find another way. You know, yeah, classic kind of things.
Put some points and click.
Yeah, point and click. Yeah, nope, can't do that. I mean, it's a yeah, so many lines. But even with that, if you have an observant character, they might go, that door is locked, right? Have to find another way. That's different from somebody who might be a barbarian who's like, that door's locked.
Can't we just
Okay,
smash
yeah, find another. You know, and it can be exactly the same, but once you have a way of, I would give them enough to frame. It's about giving them a worldview. What is their worldview? You don't have to go into their backstory because you don't really want to, you know, make that specific, but give them a worldview. How do they view the world? And once you have that, you can frame it in that way. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Can you mention Thomasina? Because she is a player character.
She is, and she's incredibly opinionated.
Yeah, she is. So that is another option,
and
yeah.
throughout...
This is in Hobbs Barrow, excavation of Hobbs Barrow.
Yes, it's a lovely little point-and-click horror game from Cloak and Dagger and Wadget Eye Games. Dave's company went right out of my head. He's got a long history of those sort of things. That was, in a way, I had to be very specific and very opinionated, but I didn't need eyes and ears in the world because it was a much shorter script. Yeah. And if you don't, you know, going back to the swords, if you don't tell me what the swords are for, I'm going to make it up. I'm just going to make it up because then you've got something specific. Now, if it doesn't work, then we talk about it. But I'm, you know, and a more experienced actor will do that. A less experienced actor is going to be quite blank with it. So it's interesting that you do, well, again, you've done a lot of the work for the actor because you're the eyes and ears in the world. In a way, the actors, well, NDAs are not privy to it.
No, exactly.
So, yeah.
I think that's really important, just always to bear in mind if you are working with actors, that you know your game super well. They know nothing about the game. So never assume, always take it from the example as you are introducing someone completely new to the game, yeah? I get a lot of developers going, oh, well, of course that happens after that. And I'm like, no, we don't, they don't know that. And actors, a lot of actors don't play games. Most actors, yeah. Oh, no. So, yeah, no.
That would be the advice to actors if you want to work in this, be interested. And it helps. You get grumpy actors, don't it? Why, I've said this 5 different ways. Why are you asking me? Oh, no, we're going to have to explain what a game is.
Right, another question.
No, please.
Another question.
I did see a few, so I'm going to take you and then one here in Monday.
So you've talked about how like the industry has changed, right? What you added, like the intimacy coordinator and stuff like that. But obviously, it's always an iterative process about making games and how we make them change all the time. So yes, let's take Baldur's Gate as an example. What is one thing you felt lacked or could be improved for the next big game that you are a part of making?
You do it. I can actually answer this super quickly. Opting out of intimacy coordinators rather than opting in. I had to ask and it took some time to put that together. I think they were a little surprised, even though that was available. Yeah, you can't. But with the mocap guys who actually did the sex scenes, I think it was a given that they would. And then I think for the actors, and it wasn't just me. It was like, could you? Because you'll get a better performance, and it was fine in the end. But I would actually just generally, with a game that has that any content, in fact, if it makes your performance worse, then you opt out of it. I would just as a safeguard, but we're all kind of working this out at the moment, as you said.
Yeah, I would say like from the start, be very clear about. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 is a. I mean, it's a good example, but it also, it took a really long time, and it's a very large game. But I would say what I would like to see very generally from games going forward is having a team that has very, very clear ideas of how they're going to keep their team safe, not just their performers or their actors. Your game might not have any voice acting or acting in it whatsoever, but how you're going to keep your team safe. So
Can I say as well, the intimacy coordinator was for the whole team?
Yes, it was, yeah. So it's not just actors, it is for crew as well. Yeah. Anybody in an intimacy coordination, in any scene that requires an IC or an intimacy coordinator, you have to get consent from everyone. Yeah. Not just the actors, it's everyone, and anyone can withdraw their consent at any time. So it's not just your actor, it is anyone who's in the room. And we did that with our wellbeing coordinator as well. Anyone could withdraw consent at any point and say, I'm not comfortable with doing this. That is the only way you keep a team safe. It can't just be, we have an intimacy coordinator or wellbeing coordinator just for you. Just for you. Everybody else, you're just going to have to be cool with it or leave. That's not the way safety works. Yeah. So I would like to see going forward more holistic treatment and consideration of your team. You get a lot of teams who go, this is the cool game we're going to do, and here are our design elements, and here's the cool mechanic, and it's going to look amazing. I would like to see more teams go, how are we going to work as a team? How is this going to happen? How are we actually going to manage things? How are we going to manage each other's mental health? What happens if we have problems? This is really basic, but it's really important. What do our hiring and firing processes look like? How do we onboard people? How do we make people feel they're part of the team? All really stuff that I see teams doing quite late down the line. I know, and it sounds better in a reactive way. I'd like people to start thinking of them, the game designers, to say, when you set up your own indie company, which a lot of you are probably going to go off and do, think of these things from the start, even if it's just 3 of you, I work with a lot of indie companies, and I see people coming onboarding, and it's something like, they just turn up in the Discord, and you're like, hello? If anybody's on Discord, you're probably all on Discord. You can see that general, and it's like little animated, GIF. It's like, say hello to Jane, and you're like, hi, Jane. Especially if it's a company of 10 of you, you're like, and who are you? And then they'll be like, oh yes, sorry everyone, this is Jane. Jane's coming on to do 2D art or whatever, and you're like, cool. And that's fine, but it's a weird way to kind of get to know your colleague, especially when a lot of you are going to be working remotely as well. A lot of game design's done remotely. Think about these things from the top. How do you make inclusive teams and teams where people feel supported make better games? That is a documented fact. So there we go. Yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
Fabulous. I want to see that on T-shirts. I love that. No, really, that's a manifesto. I love it. Yeah. I saw Sabina at the back. Is that right? Yeah. Hi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sabina. I'm one of Josephine's lovely colleagues at the department. Thank you so much. That was a very, very fascinating conversation with a lot of insights for me. Sparked two thoughts. One thought, one question, or one shameless plug here. Yes. Because I really loved your points about cultural sensitivity and this request to kind of really make safety a priority. Just want to have an announcement for everyone that we're running a jam called Fair Play Jam in Gotland that is actually featuring free sensitivity training by experts. So if you want to give it a try, the applications are open. Talk to me, talk to Ray about it, talk to anyone in the department. We can send you a link. And the second thing is a question for you. I'm really interested in if you choose one thing, what is the absolute favorite part of your work?
Is that
For both of you, I suppose.
I genuinely love the collaboration I feel I'm in the right part of the entertainment industry for that. I'm trying to break down silos between departments. And, you know, we've gone quite deep into what that looks like. In tech, we call it tribal knowledge. You've got to find the history of the group. And if it's not being documented, like you said, where do you go from there? I truly enjoy that multidisciplinary collaboration, which you get in theatre too.
My favourite part of the job is when an actor has embodied the character so completely, when they have taken it on within them, that they can just react naturally as that character, and then they perform a scene or a line in a way that you never thought of, that the writer never thought of, that nobody in the room had ever, and it's so truthful and beautiful for the character that you just go, oh my God, that's them. That's them. That's amazing. That's amazing. It happened a lot in Sam's sessions. Yeah. You see, yeah. Not true.
We flew through them, didn't we?
We flew through them, yeah.
Once the reports started going,
Yeah.
knocking them out.
Yeah, knocking them out, yeah.
Like absolutely on each other's wavelength.
Yeah, it was just, so, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I would say is that as people are going to create characters out there, if you do work with actors, or even if you're an artist working with writers, if you're writers working with artists, if you're somebody who wants a sound designer to create a really cool, gnarly sound for your character, trust your co-creators. Trust them, trust their ideas. One of the things that's really, one of the things that I don't like is people keeping too much control on things, you know. Yeah, definitely people have to have ownership of stuff, you know, that's fine. But, you know, one of the things I said, especially on a game as huge as Baldur's Gate 3, and this is going back to another thing about continuity and keeping tonal continuity. The people that knew the characters, the origin characters, the characters, and the TAVs that had worked on the game, the people who were the most constant on those characters were the writers. And the writer we had on Baldur's Gate 3, there was a specific for the main characters, there was one writer for each character. The writers and the actors. So I would come in after not having worked with an actor for a while, because I'd been working with other one. It was an enormous game. And I would come in and go, where's your character now? Where's Lae'zel now? Where's she on her journey so far? Catch me up. Tell me where she is. Because you know it's yours. Now, as the voice or the performance director or both, I was leading the session. But I don't know that character as well as Deborah Wild does. I don't know Karlach as well as you do, because I haven't lived and breathed and figured out that Karlach, you know, the weight of Karlach. There's something that Tracy Wiles as Jaheira does, where you can just give me like shadow puppets of the actors now, and I'm like, oh, that's them. No, that's them, because Tracy does this thing where she kind of looks away when she's thinking. When Jaheira's frustrated about something, she does that. And that's something that she, you know, nobody taught her that. She did it. It works for the character. It's amazing. I don't know what your character's been on, so I trust my collaborators. I trust my actors. I trust the writers. Where are they now? And that's one of the big ways that you can keep continuity in teams. And that's one of the ways that when you get magical moments where the actor has completely inhabited the character, you're like, oh, look at that. Look at that truth. All there.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry I can't go to any more questions. I just love this theme of collaboration, co-advocacy, consistency through working together with good communication, good care, safer practices. It just seems to be the same message throughout the whole day. Thank you so much for a fabulous conversation. Thank you, Vilhelm, for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you.